What if what we know isn't really knowledge at all? This is where philosophy begins, not with answers, but with wonder, with questions that arrive quietly in the night, questions that unsettle what we thought was certain. Philosophy starts when we look at the world, and instead of accepting it as it appears, we ask, why? We ask, how do I know? It begins with curiosity, that gentle, persistent voice that whispers, but what if things are different than they seem? And it begins with doubt, not the anxious kind, but a calm, meditative doubt, the kind that opens doors rather than closing them. Imagine yourself as a child again, asking why over and over, each answer leading to another question, never quite reaching the end. Philosophy is returning to that state where nothing is too obvious to question, where wonder is alive again. Let's begin with something simple, something we rarely think about. Skepticism. Skepticism is the practice of questioning, of not accepting things simply because they're presented to us or because everyone else believes them. It's a gentle refusal to rush towards certainty. The skeptic asks, how do we know? And then, how do we know that? It's not about being negative or refusing to believe anything at all. It's about approaching the world with open hands, ready to examine, ready to consider, never grasping too tightly. Think of skepticism as a kind of mental hygiene, a way of keeping the mind clear, uncluttered by assumptions we've never examined. Now, let's go deeper into this questioning. One of the most profound forms of skepticism is skepticism about the external world itself. What if the world you see around you, the room you're in, the sounds you hear, what if none of it is quite what it seems? This isn't meant to frighten, but to invite wonder. The skeptic about the external world asks, how do I know there's a world outside my mind at all? Everything you experience comes to you through your senses, through sight and sound and touch. But your senses have been wrong before, haven't they? A dream felt real until you woke. A mirage looked like water until you came closer. So the question arises, gently, persistently, how can I be certain that what I'm experiencing right now is reality and not some kind of elaborate illusion? This question isn't asking you to stop trusting your senses, only to notice that there's a gap between what appears and what is. And in that gap, philosophy lives. Let's consider another puzzle, one that troubled philosophers for centuries. The problem of induction. Induction is how we learn from experience. The sun rose yesterday and the day before, and every day you can remember. So you expect, quite reasonably, that the sun will rise tomorrow. But here's the puzzle, the gentle question that disrupts this confidence. Just because something has always happened, does that mean it must happen again? Every time you've dropped an object, it has fallen down. But does that prove with absolute certainty that the next object you drop will also fall? The problem of induction asks, how can the past tell us about the future? We rely on patterns, on repetition, on the belief that nature is uniform, that the rules don't change. But this belief itself comes from experience. And so we're caught, using experience to justify our trust in experience. It's not that induction doesn't work, it's that we can't prove it must work. We move through life on a kind of faith, a trust that the patterns will hold, that tomorrow will be like today. And perhaps that's all right. Perhaps certainty was never the goal. These questions lead us somewhere interesting, somewhere dizzying if we follow too far. It's called infinite regress. Imagine someone asks you, how do you know that? You give a reason. You justify your belief. But then they ask again, how do you know that reason is true? So you give another reason to support the first reason. And they ask again and again, and each answer requires another answer behind it, like a hall of mirrors stretching backward into infinity. This is infinite regress, the recognition that every justification seems to need another justification, Every foundation needs something to stand on, and we never quite reach the bottom. It's like trying to hold up a shelf by attaching it to another shelf, which is attached to another shelf, on and on with nothing fixed to the wall. How do we escape this endless chain? That question is one of the deepest in philosophy. And there are several answers, each with its own beauty, each with its own complications. All of these questions about knowledge and justification and certainty, they belong to a field called epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge itself. Not what we know, but how we know, and whether we can know it all. It asks, what is knowledge? Is it just believing something that happens to be true? Or is it more than that? Epistemology examines the nature of belief, of truth, of justification. It explores the relationship between the mind and reality, between the knower and the known. In epistemology, we're not studying mathematics or history or science. We're studying the ground beneath all of those subjects. We're asking, what makes any of this possible? It's philosophy turning its gaze inward, examining its own tools, questioning its own foundations. And in the history of epistemology, one phrase stands out, 3 words that changed everything. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. These words come from René Descartes, a philosopher who took skepticism as far as it could go. He doubted everything, his senses, his memories, even mathematics, searching for something, anything, certain. He could doubt whether the external world existed. He could doubt whether his body was real, but he could not doubt that he was doubting. To doubt is to think, and to think, something must be doing the thinking. Even if everything else is an illusion, even if a demon is deceiving him about everything, there must be an I that is being deceived. There must be a mind that exists to be fooled. I think, therefore I am. Not, I have a body, therefore I am. Not, I see things, therefore I am. But simply, I think. And thinking requires existence. This became a foundation, a fixed point in the shifting seas of doubt. And from this one certainty, Descartes tried to rebuild knowledge, piece by piece with care. Descartes' method represents one approach to knowledge, an approach called rationalism. Rationalism is the view that reason, pure thought, can give us knowledge about the world. That the mind itself, through logic and intuition, can discover truths without needing to look outside. The rationalist trusts thinking more than sensing. They believe that some knowledge is built into the structure of thought itself, waiting to be uncovered, like mathematical truths that don't depend on experience. For the rationalist, the mind is not a blank slate, but something active, something capable of knowing, just by thinking clearly enough, carefully enough. Imagine knowledge as light from within, rather than light reflected from outside. This is rationalism, the trust in reason and the power of thought itself. But there's another view, equally powerful, equally compelling. Empiricism, not if rationalism says knowledge comes from within, empiricism says it comes from without. Empiricism is the view that experience, what we see and hear and touch, is the source of all knowledge. That we learn about the world by observing it, by testing it, by encountering it with our senses. The empiricist sees the mind as a blank slate at birth, and experience writes upon it, slowly, filling it with images and ideas and understanding. For the empiricist, you cannot know what chocolate tastes like just by thinking about it. You cannot know what red looks like without seeing it. Knowledge must come through the doorways of experience. Imagine knowledge as light from outside, entering through the windows of perception, illuminating what was dark within. Rationalism and empiricism, reason and experience, the inner light and the outer light. These two views have shaped philosophy for centuries, and perhaps the truth lives somewhere between them. We're nearly at the end of this journey through questions and wonder. But let's rest on two more ideas, two ways philosophers have tried to solve that problem of infinite regress. The first is called foundationalism. Foundationalism says, yes, most of our beliefs need justification, they need reasons. But eventually, we reach basic beliefs, foundational beliefs, that don't need justification from anything else. They justify themselves. Think of a building, each floor is supported by the floor below, but eventually, you reach the ground, the foundation. And the foundation doesn't need anything beneath it. It simply is. For foundationalists, some beliefs are like that ground floor. Perhaps our most basic sensory experiences, perhaps self-evident logical truths, perhaps that Cartesian certainty. I think, therefore I am. These beliefs stop the regress. They give us somewhere to stand. But others found this unsatisfying. They asked, why should some beliefs be special? Why should they need no justification? And so they proposed something different. Coherentism. Coherentism offers a different image entirely. Instead of a building on a foundation, imagine a web, a network where every strand supports every other strand, where no single thread holds everything up, but the pattern itself, the way everything connects, creates stability. Coherentism says beliefs justify each other, not in an infinite chain, but in a circle, a network of mutual support. A belief is justified not because it rests on something else, but because it fits, because it coheres with all your other beliefs. Think of knowledge not as a pyramid with a base and a peak, but as a tapestry where meaning emerges from the whole, from the way the threads interweave. No single point is more fundamental than another. Everything supports everything else in a dance of mutual justification. And so we return to where we began, with wonder, with questions, with that gentle shock of recognizing that what seemed obvious is mysterious after all. Philosophy begins when we wake up to the strangeness of knowing, the strangeness of being, the strangeness of asking, how do I know anything at all? Let these questions rest with you now, not as problems to solve, but as companions in the night, as you drift into sleep, into dreams, into that other kind of knowing that needs no justification at all. Is the world out there, or only in our minds? We've been asking how we know things, but now let's ask something deeper, something that reaches beneath knowledge itself. What is reality? What is it made of? When you look around, you see objects, solid things, tables and chairs, stars and stones. They seem so obviously real, so undeniably there. But what if we asked, what does it mean for something to be real? What is the nature, the very substance of existence itself? These questions, these deep, fundamental questions about the nature of reality, they belong to a field called metaphysics. Metaphysics. The word itself means beyond physics, beyond the physical. It's the study of what lies beneath, or behind, or beyond the world we can touch and measure. Where physics asks how things work, metaphysics asks what things are. Where science observes and experiments, metaphysics contemplates and reasons about the fundamental nature of existence. Metaphysics asks questions like, do numbers exist? Does time flow, or is it an illusion? Do we have free will? What is consciousness? What makes something real? These are questions you can answer with a microscope or a telescope. They require a different kind of looking, an inward looking, a thinking that reaches toward the foundations of everything. Metaphysics is philosophy at its most ambitious, asking not just how we know the world, but what the world is in its deepest nature. One of the oldest answers to this question, one of the most natural answers, is called realism. Realism. Realism is the view that the world exists independently of our minds. That reality is out there, whether we perceive it or not, whether we think about it or not. The tree in the forest makes a sound when it falls, even if no one is there to hear it. The mountain exists, even if no one climbs it. The stars shine, even if no one looks up. For the realist, the world doesn't need us. It was here before we arrived. It will be here after we're gone. Our minds discover reality. They don't create it. This feels natural, doesn't it? It matches our everyday experience. When you close your eyes, the room doesn't disappear. When you leave your house, it doesn't cease to exist. Realism says the world has its own existence, its own nature, independent of anyone knowing it or perceiving it. Reality is objective, solid, out there. It's a comforting thought, in a way. The world is real, stable, not dependent on the fragile thread of our awareness. But there's another view, equally ancient, equally profound. Idealism. Idealism offers a different answer entirely. Idealism says reality is fundamentally mental. That mind, or consciousness, or ideas are more basic than matter. That what we call the physical world is actually made of or dependent on mind. For the idealist, the world isn't independent of consciousness. Reality is, in some deep sense, woven from thought, from perception, from experience itself. This sounds strange at first, doesn't it? But consider everything you've ever experienced. Every sight, every sound, every sensation has appeared in consciousness. You've never encountered a world outside of experience. The idealist asks, how do you know there's a material world behind your perceptions when all you've ever known is perception? Perhaps the universe is more like a dream or a thought than like a machine. Perhaps consciousness isn't something that emerges from matter, but matter is something that appears within consciousness. Some idealists say reality is made of ideas in the mind of God. Others say there's only one universal consciousness, and we are all waves in that infinite ocean of mind. Idealism invites us to consider that mind might be more fundamental than we thought. That the mental isn't a byproduct of the physical, but perhaps it's the other way around. This tension between the material and the mental, between the physical and the ideal, is ancient. And one of the most beautiful attempts to resolve it comes from a philosopher named Plato. Plato's theory of forms. Imagine two worlds. One world is the world you see around you, full of particular things. This chair, that tree, this cup. Everything is specific, individual, temporary. Things come into being and pass away. Nothing lasts forever. But Plato said there's another world, a realm of forms or ideas, perfect, eternal, unchanging. In this realm, there is no this chair or that chair, but the form of chair itself, the perfect, eternal essence of what a chair is. Not made of wood or metal, but made of pure idea, pure being. Every chair you've ever seen is just a copy, an imperfect reflection of this eternal form. Like shadows on a cave wall, cast by a fire behind us, the objects of this world are dim reflections of perfect realities. And this applies to everything. There's the form of beauty, the form of justice, the form of the circle. These forms are more real than anything you can touch because they're eternal, perfect, unchanging. When you recognize a chair as a chair, or when you understand what justice is, you're not learning from this world. You're remembering the eternal forms that your soul knew before birth. For Plato, the physical world is like a shadow, and the world of forms is the true reality. The material is temporary and imperfect. The ideal is eternal and perfect. It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? A vision where abstract truths are more real than concrete things, where beauty and goodness are not just ideas in our heads, but real, eternal, woven into the fabric of existence itself. But not all philosophers looked for perfect forms or universal consciousness. Some went in the opposite direction, looking not for what unifies reality, but for what it reduces to. This approach is called reductionism. Reductionism is the view that complex things can be explained by reduced to simpler things. That a table is really just molecules. That molecules are really just atoms. That atoms are really just particles. That perhaps particles are really just energy or vibrations in quantum fields. Layer by layer, we peel back the complexity until we reach something simple, something fundamental. The basic building blocks from which everything else is made. The reductionist says, when you understand the parts, you understand the whole. A living cell is really just chemistry. Chemistry is really just physics. Everything reduces eventually to the most basic level, and that level explains everything above it. There's power in this view. Science has achieved extraordinary things by breaking complex systems into simpler components, by reducing and analyzing and discovering the mechanisms beneath. But some ask, is that all there is? When you reduce a symphony to vibrations in air, have you really explained the music? When you reduce love to neurotransmitters, have you captured what love is? Perhaps some things are more than the sum of their parts. Perhaps complexity creates something new, something that emerges that can't be fully explained by what lies below. But the reductionist keeps digging, keeps simplifying, trusting that at the bottom, we'll find the truth. And when we're searching for truth, when we're trying to explain reality, philosophers often appeal to a principle, a razor that cuts away the unnecessary. Occam's razor. It's not really a razor, of course. It's a principle of simplicity. Occam's razor says, when you have multiple explanations for something, choose the simplest one. The one that assumes the least. The one that doesn't multiply entities beyond necessity. If you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. If your car won't start, maybe it's out of gas before you conclude the engine has seized. The razor doesn't say the simplest explanation is always right. It says, all else being equal, simplicity is a guide. Don't add complications unless you need to. It's a principle of elegance, of economy. Nature doesn't waste. Truth doesn't require elaborate machinery. When two theories explain the same facts, but one requires fewer assumptions, fewer entities, fewer miracles, choose that one, at least as a starting point. Occam's razor has guided scientists and philosophers for centuries, trimming away the excess, the baroque, the unnecessarily complex. It's a reminder that sometimes the truth is simpler than we think. That we don't need to invent elaborate stories when a straightforward explanation will do. But let's end with something that defies simplicity, something that stretches the imagination in the opposite direction. Modal realism. This is one of the strangest, most radical, most fascinating ideas in metaphysics. You've probably thought about possibilities before, about how things could have been different. You could have chosen a different career. You could have been born in a different country. The dinosaurs could have never gone extinct. These are possible worlds. Alternative ways reality could be. Most of us think these are just hypotheticals, imaginary scenarios, useful for thinking, but not real. But modal realism says, no, these possible worlds are just as real as this one. Right now, in this moment, there exist infinite worlds. Worlds where you made different choices. Worlds where history unfolded differently. Worlds with different laws of physics. Worlds where entirely different things exist. And they're not hypothetical. They're not imaginary. They're real. Fully, completely actual. The only difference between this world and those worlds is that we happen to be in this one. That's it. We call this one actual, but from the perspective of someone in another world, their world is actual and ours is merely possible. Every possibility, every way things could be, is somewhere, in some world, just as concrete, just as physical, just as real as the world you're in right now. It's overwhelming, isn't it? The idea that reality is so much vaster than we imagined. That every choice not taken, every path not walked, exists fully in another world. Most philosophers find this difficult to accept. It seems extravagant. It violates Occam's razor in the most spectacular way. Why believe in infinite worlds when one world seems hard enough to explain? But the modal realist has an answer. They say these worlds help us understand modality, possibility, and necessity. They give us a way to make sense of what it means to say something could be true or must be true. And besides, why should our intuitions about what's extravagant matter? Perhaps reality is extravagant. Perhaps the universe is far stranger, far richer than our everyday experience suggests. Perhaps, right now, in another world, another version of you is hearing these same words, but making different sense of them, drifting into different dreams. And so we've journeyed from the question of what reality is made of through realism and idealism, through Plato's eternal forms, through the reductionist search for simplicity, through Occam's razor, to the modal realist's infinite worlds. Each vision, a different way of seeing. Each answer, opening new questions. Is the world out there or in here? Is it matter or mind? Is it simple or infinitely complex? Perhaps the answer is we're still learning to ask the question. We're still opening our eyes to the strangeness of being, to the mystery of existence itself. Let these visions rest with you now, these different ways of seeing reality, not as puzzles to solve, but as windows to look through as you drift into sleep, into dreams, into that space where perhaps all possible worlds meet. If my body changes and my thoughts change, what stays me? We've looked outward at the nature of reality, at the structure of the world. But now, let's turn inward. Let's look at something closer than anything else. Ourselves. What are you? Not what. You do and not your name or your history, but what you are in your most essential nature. Are you your body, your thoughts, your memories, something else entirely? When you say, what are you pointing to? This question, this mystery of what we are, leads us to one of philosophy's deepest puzzles, the mind-body problem. The mind-body problem asks, what is the relationship between your mind and your body? Between your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, and the physical matter of your brain and body? You have thoughts. Right now, you're hearing these words, perhaps feeling sleepy, perhaps thinking about tomorrow. These are mental experiences, subjective, private, known only to you. But you also have a brain, a physical organ, made of neurons and synapses, chemical reactions and electrical signals, objective, public, observable by others. So what's the connection? How does the physical become the mental? How do neurons create consciousness? How does the feeling of red emerge from wavelengths of light? How does the experience of joy arise from neurotransmitters? How does the private world of thought come from the public world of matter? This is the mind-body problem. The puzzle of how two seemingly different things, mind and matter, relate to each other. Or perhaps, whether they're really two things at all. One of the oldest answers, one that feels natural in some ways, is called dualism. Dualism says there are two kinds of things in reality, the physical and the mental, matter and mind, body and soul. Your body is physical. It takes up space. It has weight. It can be measured and touched. follows the laws of physics. But your mind, your consciousness, is different. It doesn't weigh anything. It doesn't occupy space. You can't touch a thought. You can't measure joy in inches or grams. The dualist says these are fundamentally different substances. Your body is made of matter. Your mind is made of something else, something non-physical. This was the view of Descartes, who we met earlier. He believed the mind and body interact, they influence each other, but they're separate, distinct, two different kinds of being. When you decide to raise your arm, your non-physical mind somehow causes your physical body to move. When you stub your toe, your physical body somehow creates a non-physical experience of pain. Dualism resonates with how we feel. Don't you feel somehow separate from your body? As if you're a consciousness inhabiting this physical form, but not identical to it. But dualism faces a puzzle. If mind and matter are completely different, how do they interact? How does something non-physical push and pull something physical? How does the ghost move the machine? This question has troubled dualists for centuries, and it's led many philosophers to search for different answers. Another answer, one that dominates modern thinking, is called materialism, or sometimes physicalism. Materialism says there's only one kind of substance, matter, the physical. Everything that exists is ultimately physical. There is no separate mental substance, no ghost in the machine. Your mind, your thoughts, your consciousness, they're all just your brain. Physical processes, neurons firing, chemistry, and electricity. When you feel happy, that's a particular pattern of brain activity. When you think about tomorrow, that's neurons communicating. When you experience the color red, that's your visual cortex processing wavelengths of light. For the materialist, the mind isn't something extra. It's what the brain does. Just as digestion is what the stomach does, thinking is what the brain does. This view fits well with science. With neuroscience and biology, we can observe the brain, measure it, see how damage to certain areas affects certain mental functions. There's no need, the materialist says, to posit a separate mental substance. The physical is enough. Consciousness emerges from complexity, from the intricate dance of billions of neurons. But materialism faces its own puzzle. How does mere matter, mere physical stuff, create the inner light of consciousness? How does the objective become subjective? How do chemical reactions create the experience of tasting chocolate, or hearing music, or feeling love? There seems to be something about consciousness, something about what it's like to experience, that resists reduction to the purely physical. And yet, the materialist believes somehow matter is enough. But there's another view, stranger than dualism, more radical than materialism. A view that's ancient, but has returned in modern philosophy. Panpsychism. Panpsychism says consciousness isn't rare. It isn't something that only humans have or only animals with brains. It's not something that emerges suddenly when matter becomes complex enough. Instead, consciousness is everywhere. It's fundamental. It goes all the way down. Every particle of matter, every electron, every atom has some tiny spark of consciousness, some primitive form of experience. Not thinking necessarily, not self-awareness, but something, some inner quality, somewhat its likeness, however simple, however faint. And when matter combines, when particles form atoms, atoms form molecules, molecules form cells, cells form brains, these tiny sparks of consciousness combine too. They build on each other. They create richer, more complex, more sophisticated forms of experience. For the panpsychist, your consciousness isn't something new. It's something that's been there all along, in simpler forms, woven into the fabric of matter itself. And it sounds strange, doesn't it? The idea that a rock might have some primitive form of experience, that the universe itself might be conscious in some vast, incomprehensible way. But the panpsychist asks, isn't it stranger to think that consciousness appears from nowhere? That it emerges from completely unconscious matter, like rabbits from an empty hat? Perhaps it's easier to imagine consciousness building up from simple to complex than to imagine it appearing suddenly from nothing. Perhaps mind, like matter, is woven into the universe from the beginning. These theories about mind and matter, they're all trying to explain something we experience directly, something we know more intimately than anything else, our own consciousness. And there's a branch of philosophy dedicated to studying consciousness, not from the outside, but from within. Phenomenology. Phenomenology is the study of experience itself, of what it's like, of how things appear to consciousness. The phenomenologist doesn't ask first about brains or matter or substance. They ask, what is it like to see red? What is the structure of perception? How does time feel as it flows? What is the experience of being embodied? Phenomenology invites us to pay attention, careful, patient attention to our own experience, not to explain it away, not to reduce it to something else, but to describe it, to map its contours. When you see a tree, you don't see a collection of atoms. You see a whole, a unified object against a background. You see it from a perspective, yours, and there's something it's like to be the one seeing. Phenomenology studies that structure. The way experience is always experience of something. The way consciousness is always directed outward, toward objects, toward the world. It studies how the past feels, weighted with memory, and how the future feels, open with possibility. How your body isn't just an object you observe, but the lens through which you experience everything else. Phenomenology returns us to the texture of lived experience, to what's happening right now in consciousness. Before we theorize, before we explain, we must first notice. We must first see what's there. And in paying attention to experience, we often find it's richer, stranger, more intricate than we realized. But there's one more question we must ask. One that touches something deep, something that may have troubled you in quiet moments. The question of personal identity. Who are you, really? Your body changes. The cells in your body are replaced over months and years. Almost nothing in your body now was there 10 years ago. Every atom slowly swapped out for new atoms. Your thoughts change. Your beliefs, your memories, your desires. You're not who you were as a child. You're not who you'll be in old age. So if your body changes and your mind changes, what makes you, you? What persists? What stays the same? Is there some essential core, some unchanging self beneath all the changes? Or are you just a process, a flow, a river that never steps in the same water twice? Some philosophers say personal identity is about memory. You're the same person as long as you remember being that person. Your past selves are connected to your present self by threads of memory. But memories fade, and sometimes they're wrong. Does a forgotten childhood cease to be yours? Others say personal identity is about the body. You're the same person because you have the same body, the same physical continuity, even if the matter changes. But if your brain were transplanted, would you be where your brain is or where your body is? And some philosophers say there is no self at all. Not really. The self is an illusion, a story we tell. There are experiences, thoughts, sensations, but no permanent you having them. Just a stream of consciousness, mistaking itself for someone who's watching the stream. These questions don't have easy answers. Perhaps they don't have answers at all. Perhaps the self, like consciousness, like reality, is more mysterious than we can fully grasp. But the questions matter, because how we understand the self changes how we live, how we think about our past, our future, our responsibility, our connections to others. And so we've turned inward to the mystery of mind and body, to dualism and materialism and panpsychism, to the study of lived experience, to the puzzle of who we are. We've looked at the space between matter and consciousness, that strange gap where somehow the physical becomes aware of itself. If your body changes and your thoughts change, what stays you? Perhaps the answer is nothing stays, and everything stays. Perhaps you are the changing itself, the flow, the process of becoming. Perhaps the self is not a thing, but a happening. Not a noun, but a verb. Let these questions rest with you now, these mysteries of mind and self. Let them dissolve into the larger mystery of consciousness itself as you drift deeper into sleep, into that place where the boundaries soften, where the self becomes less solid, where consciousness meets the vast unknown. Do you choose, or are you chosen? Every day, you make decisions. What to eat, what to say, where to go. These choices feel real, don't they? They feel like yours. But what if every choice you've ever made was already determined? What if the feeling of freedom is an illusion? This question, this tension between freedom and fate, has troubled philosophers for thousands of years. And tonight, we turn to face it. The question is simple to ask, but devastating in its implications. Do we have free will? Free will is the idea that you could have done otherwise. That when you chose coffee this morning, you genuinely could have chosen tea. That your choices are truly yours, not forced by something outside you, not predetermined by the past. It's the feeling that, in each moment, the future is open. Multiple paths stretch before you, and you, through your choices, select which path becomes real. Free will means you're the author of your actions. You're responsible. Your choices matter because they're genuinely choices, not inevitable outcomes of prior causes. But there's another view, equally powerful, equally compelling: determinism. And these two views, free will and determinism, seem to stand opposed. In tension, like two forces pulling in opposite directions. This is the problem of free will and determinism. And how we resolve it, or whether we can resolve it at all, shapes how we understand ourselves. Let's look first at determinism itself. Determinism is the view that everything that happens is caused by what came before. Every event, every action, every thought follows necessarily from prior events. The universe is like a vast machine, or like dominoes falling. Each state of the universe determines the next state. Given the past and the laws of nature, the future could only unfold one way. Your choice to listen to these words right now was caused by your earlier decision, which was caused by your thoughts and desires, which were caused by your experiences, which were caused by your upbringing, which was caused by your parents' choices, which were caused by their circumstances. Trace back far enough, and every action you take was set in motion long before you were born, by the arrangement of atoms in the universe, by the initial conditions at the Big Bang. You didn't choose your genes. You didn't choose your early environment. You didn't choose the brain you were born with or the culture you grew up in. And these things shaped everything else. shaped your desires, your values, your thoughts. So when you make a choice, it feels free. But it was caused. It had to happen. Given everything that came before, you couldn't have chosen differently. This is determinism. The view that the universe is a chain of cause and effect, stretching back to the beginning of time. And you, with all your choices, are just one link in that chain. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? But many philosophers have tried to reconcile these views, to find a way that freedom and determinism can both be true. This position is called compatibilism. Compatibilism says, yes, determinism is true. Everything is caused. Your choices are caused by your desires and beliefs. Your desires and beliefs are caused by your experiences, and so on. But that doesn't mean you're not free. The compatibilist says we've been asking the wrong question. Free will doesn't mean being uncaused. It means being able to do what you want without external constraint. You're free when you act according to your own desires, when no one is forcing you, when you're not being coerced or manipulated, when you're doing what you want to do. It doesn't matter that your desires were caused. What matters is that they're yours, that you're acting from them, not against them. Think of it this way. If someone puts a gun to your head and forces you to do something, you're not free. But if you choose to do something because you want to, even if that want was caused by your past, you are free. Freedom, the compatibilist says, is about the right kind of causation. Internal causation from your own mind, not external compulsion. You're a link in the causal chain, yes, but you're not bypassed by the chain. You're part of how the future unfolds. Your choices matter because they're the mechanism through which your desires become actions. This view offers comfort. You can accept determinism, accept that everything is caused, and still believe you're free. Still believe your choices matter. But not everyone is convinced. Some philosophers say you can't have it both ways, that free will and determinism really are incompatible, that they can't both be true. This position is called incompatibilism. The incompatibilist says compatibilism is too easy. It redefines freedom, makes it mean something less than what we really want. When we say we have free will, we don't just mean we can do what we want. We mean we could have wanted something else. That our wants themselves aren't just inevitable products of prior causes. Real freedom, the incompatibilist says, requires more. It requires that you're the ultimate source of your actions, that the chain of causation stops with you, that you're not just passing along causes from the past, but creating something new. If determinism is true, then everything about you was determined before you existed. Your character, your desires, your choices. You're just playing out a script written by the universe. And that, the incompatibilist says, is not freedom. That's not what we mean when we talk about free will. So incompatibilism draws a line. Free will and determinism cannot both be true. One of them must be false. But which one? That's where incompatibilists divide. Some incompatibilists accept determinism and therefore reject free will. This is called hard determinism. Hard determinism is the most austere view, the most uncompromising. It says, yes, everything is determined. Every thought, every action, every choice, caused by what came before, stretching back to the beginning of time. And therefore, no one has free will. Not really. Not in the way we imagine. When you chose what to eat today, you couldn't have chosen differently. Not given who you are, your history, your brain state at that moment. The choice was inevitable. When someone commits a crime, they were caused to do it. By their genes, their upbringing, their circumstances. They couldn't have done otherwise. When you feel proud of your accomplishments or guilty about your failures, those feelings are based on an illusion. The illusion that you were the ultimate source, that you could have been different. Hard determinism strips away that illusion. It says, you are what the universe made you. You do what you were always going to do. There is no freedom, only the unfolding of causes. This sounds bleak, doesn't it? Like everything is futile, like nothing matters. But the hard determinist might say, understanding this brings clarity, brings compassion. If no one is truly responsible for what they do, then perhaps we can let go of blame, let go of resentment, let go of guilt. Perhaps we can see people as products of their circumstances, worthy of understanding, even when they've done wrong, worthy of help in changing their behavior, even if that change too will be determined. Perhaps accepting determinism doesn't make life meaningless. Perhaps it just changes what meaning looks like. But still, the question haunts us because it feels like we're free. Every moment of choice feels open, feels real. When you decide to keep listening or to stop, it feels like your decision. And perhaps that feeling, even if it's an illusion, is what matters. Perhaps we can't help but live as if we're free, even if we doubt it philosophically. Or perhaps determinism isn't quite right. Perhaps quantum mechanics, with its randomness, its uncertainty, breaks the chain of causation. Perhaps the universe isn't as determined as we thought. Though randomness isn't quite freedom either, is it? If your choices are random, are they really yours? These questions don't have final answers. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But they matter. Because how we understand freedom shapes how we understand responsibility, punishment, praise, guilt, pride, everything we feel about our choices and the choices of others. And so we've wrestled with this tension between freedom and determinism, between the feeling that we choose and the possibility that everything is already decided. We've seen compatibilism trying to preserve freedom within determinism. We've seen incompatibilism insisting they cannot both be true. We've seen hard determinism accepting the austere conclusion that freedom is illusion. Do you choose, or are you chosen? Perhaps you're both. Perhaps you're neither. Perhaps the question itself needs to be asked differently. Perhaps you are a process, a pattern, a wave in the ocean of causation that somehow becomes aware of itself, aware of its own unfolding. And maybe that's enough. Not ultimate freedom, but something. Not complete determinism, but something. Something in between. Something mysterious. Let this tension rest with you now, this ancient question. Don't try to solve it. Just let it be as you drift deeper into sleep, where choices dissolve, where the future becomes the present, where you simply are. Is being good about rules, outcomes, or character? We've asked what we can know, what reality is, what we are. We've wrestled with freedom and fate. But now, we arrive at perhaps the most important question of all. How should we live? Not how we do live, but how we should. What makes an action right or wrong? What makes a life good? What do we owe to each other? These are the questions of ethics, and they matter because we face them every day, in small choices and large ones, in moments of conflict and moments of doubt. Ethics, or value theory, is the study of right and wrong, of good and bad, of how we ought to act. It's sometimes called moral philosophy, the systematic attempt to understand what makes actions right, what makes lives worth living, what makes some things valuable and others not. Ethics asks, should you tell a lie to spare someone's feelings? Should you keep a promise when breaking it would help more people? Is it worse to cause harm or to allow harm to happen? These aren't just abstract puzzles. They're the fabric of life. Every day, you navigate ethical choices, sometimes without even noticing. And throughout history, philosophers have proposed different frameworks, different ways of thinking about what makes actions right or wrong. Tonight, we'll explore 3 of the most influential approaches, 3 different answers to the question, what does it mean to be good? The first approach says, look at the results. Look at what happens. Good actions are those that produce good outcomes. This is utilitarianism. Utilitarianism says the right action is the one that creates the most good for the most people. Or more precisely, the most happiness, the most pleasure, the least suffering. It's beautifully simple. When faced with a choice, calculate. Which option produces more well-being? Which reduces more suffering? Choose that one. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your intentions were. All that matters is the outcome, the consequences. If lying saves 10 people from suffering, then lie. If breaking a promise helps more people than keeping it, then break it. The ends justify the means. Utilitarianism is democratic. Everyone's happiness counts equally. Your happiness, my happiness, a stranger's happiness. One person's pain is just as important as another's, and it's universal. It applies everywhere, in every situation. Simply ask, will this action increase or decrease the total amount of well-being in the world? There's something appealing about this, isn't there? It seems fair, impartial, focused on what really matters, making the world better. But utilitarianism faces challenges. Sometimes, maximizing happiness requires things that feel wrong. Sacrificing one innocent person to save 5. Violating someone's rights for the greater good. And it's demanding. Very demanding. Because if you can always do more good, then perhaps you're always obligated to give more, sacrifice more, until you've reduced yourself to the level of those you're helping. Still, utilitarianism offers clarity, a single principle, a compass pointing toward the greatest good for the greatest number. But there's another way of thinking about ethics, one that says consequences aren't everything. Some things are simply right or wrong, regardless of outcomes. This is deontology. Deontology comes from the Greek word for duty, and that's what it's about. Duty, obligation, rules that bind us, regardless of consequences. The deontologist says some actions are inherently wrong. Lying is wrong. Breaking promises is wrong. Using people merely as means to an end is wrong. Even if lying would produce better consequences, even if everyone would be happier, you still shouldn't lie. Because lying violates a duty, a moral rule that we're bound to follow. For the deontologist, morality isn't about calculating outcomes. It's about respecting rules, honoring duties, acting from the right principles, regardless of results. You might save more lives by lying, but that doesn't make lying right. You might create more happiness by breaking a promise, but the promise still binds you. This view takes rights seriously. It says people have dignity. They're not just vessels for happiness to be maximized. They're ends in themselves, worthy of respect, not to be used or violated even for good outcomes. Deontology protects the individual. It says you can't sacrifice one innocent person for 5 others, because that one person has rights, has dignity, and those can't be overridden just because the math works out better. But deontology faces its own challenges. What if following the rules leads to terrible consequences? What if telling the truth gets someone killed? Do the rules still bind us then? And which rules? Where do they come from? How do we know them? The most famous deontologist was Immanuel Kant, and he proposed a principle called the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative, Kant said, act only according to rules that you could will to be universal laws. What does this mean? It means, before you act, ask yourself, what if everyone did this? What if this became a universal rule? Should you make a false promise to get what you want? Ask, what if everyone made false promises? Then promises would become meaningless. The very practice of promising would collapse. So making false promises fails the test. You can't will it to be a universal law because it's self-defeating. It destroys the very institution it depends on. The categorical imperative also says, treat people as ends in themselves, never merely as means. Don't use people. Don't manipulate them. Don't treat them as tools for your purposes. Respect their dignity, their autonomy, their capacity to make their own choices. Kant believed this principle is binding on all rational beings. Always, categorically. Not, if you want happiness, then do this, but simply, do this, period. It's demanding, uncompromising, but it offers clarity, a way to know with certainty what duty requires. But there's a third approach, one that's older than both utilitarianism and deontology, one that asks, are we focusing on a wrong thing? Maybe ethics isn't primarily about actions at all. Maybe it's about character. This is virtue ethics. Virtue ethics says, don't ask, what should I do? Ask, what kind of person should I be? Focus not on rules or consequences, but on virtues, on excellences of character, courage, honesty, compassion, wisdom, justice, temperance. The virtuous person doesn't follow rules mechanically, doesn't calculate consequences coldly. They act from a well-formed character, from good habits, from a sense of what's appropriate in each situation. Think of a kind person. They don't help others because a rule says to, or because it maximizes happiness. They help because that's who they are. Kindness flows naturally from their character. Virtue ethics is holistic. It looks at the whole person, the whole life, not just isolated actions. It asks, are you becoming who you should be? Are you flourishing, living well? And it's flexible. It recognizes that ethics is complex, that different situations require different responses, that there's no formula, only wisdom developed through practice. The virtuous person has practical wisdom. They can see what the situation requires. They know when to be firm and when to be gentle, when to speak and when to be silent. This can't be captured in rules. It must be learned through experience, through imitation of wise people, through trial and error. Virtue ethics feels natural, doesn't it? More human than cold calculation or rigid rules. It speaks to who we want to become, not just what we should do. But it has its own challenges. Which virtues? Different cultures prize different qualities. And how does character help in hard cases, where even wise people disagree? These three approaches, they give us frameworks for thinking about right and wrong. But ethics also recognizes that some actions go beyond duty. This is called supererogation. Supererogation means actions that are good to do, but not required. actions above and beyond the call of duty, jumping on a grenade to save your comrades, donating a kidney to a stranger, devoting your life to helping the poor. These actions are praiseworthy, admirable, heroic even, but they're not obligatory. You're not a bad person if you don't do them. Supererogation recognizes there's space between the required and the forbidden, space for extraordinary goodness, for saints and heroes. Most of ethics focuses on what we must do, what we must not do, but supererogation points to what we might aspire to excellence beyond duty. It's a reminder that ethics isn't just about avoiding wrong. It's also about striving toward the good. But beneath all these ethical theories, there's a deeper question. A question about the very foundation of ethics itself. It's called the is-ought gap. The is-ought gap asks, how do we get from facts to values? From descriptions of how things are to prescriptions of how they ought to be. Science tells us what is. Humans experience pain. Actions have consequences. People have certain desires. But how do we get from those facts to you ought not cause pain, or you should maximize happiness, or you must keep promises? You can't derive an ought from an is. You can't get values from facts alone. There's a gap, a logical leap. This troubled philosophers deeply. If ethics can't be derived from facts about the world, where does it come from? Is it just subjective, cultural, arbitrary, or is there something else? Some moral reality that exists independently of facts? Some source of value we haven't fully understood? The is-ought gap reminds us that ethics is mysterious, that even as we debate what's right, we might not fully understand what rightness itself is. These abstract questions become concrete in thought experiments, puzzles that test our intuitions. The most famous is the trolley problem. Imagine a runaway trolley is heading toward 5 people on the tracks. They'll be killed if it hits them. You're standing by a lever. If you pull it, the trolley switches to a different track where there's one person. That person will die instead. Do you pull the lever? Most people say yes. Better to save 5 by sacrificing 1. This seems like utilitarian reasoning. Minimize harm, maximize lives saved. But now imagine you're on a bridge above the trolley. Next to you is a large person. If you push them off the bridge, their body will stop the trolley. The 5 will be saved, but that person will die. Do you push them? Most people say no, even though the math is the same. 5 saved, 1 lost. Something feels different. The trolley problem reveals tensions in our moral intuitions. It shows that consequences aren't all that matter, that how we bring about outcomes matters too. Pulling a lever feels different from pushing someone, even if the result is the same. These thought experiments don't give answers. They reveal complexity. They show that ethics is harder than any single principle suggests. And finally, let's expand our ethical circle even further. Most ethics focuses on humans, on what we owe to each other. But what about animals? What about other species? This question leads us to examine speciesism. Speciesism is treating beings differently, solely based on their species, giving moral weight to humans, but not to animals, just because they're not human. Some philosophers argue this is arbitrary, like racism or sexism. If an animal can suffer, doesn't its suffering matter? If it has interests, experiences, a life that can go well or badly, why should species membership determine moral status? Perhaps what matters is capacity for suffering, for joy, for having preferences. And many animals have these capacities. This doesn't mean treating all beings equally, but it means taking animal suffering seriously, not dismissing it just because they're not human. It's an expansion of the moral circle, from tribe to nation to humanity, and perhaps beyond humanity, to all beings capable of suffering. How we answer this question shapes how we eat, how we dress, how we conduct research. It shapes our relationship with the natural world. And it reminds us that ethics is not static. Our circle of moral concern can grow. And so we've journeyed through ethics, through different ways of thinking about right and wrong. We've seen utilitarianism, focused on consequences, deontology, focused on duty, virtue ethics, focused on character. We've encountered the categorical imperative, supererogation, dis-ought gap. We've puzzled over trolleys. We've questioned the boundaries of our moral concern. Is being good about rules, outcomes, or character? Perhaps it's all three. Perhaps each approach captures something true. Perhaps ethics is too rich, too complex, to be reduced to a single formula. What matters is that we try, that we think carefully about how we live, that we take seriously what we owe to others. Let these questions rest with you now, these ways of thinking about goodness, not as puzzles to solve before morning, but as companions for a lifetime, as you drift now into sleep, into that space where judgment softens, where you simply are. Who decides what's fair and who benefits? We've thought about individual choices, about right and wrong in our personal lives. But now, let's zoom out. How should power be distributed? What do we owe each other, not just as individuals, but as members of a collective? These are questions of political philosophy, of justice, of how we organize our life together. One of the oldest ways philosophers have thought about society is through the idea of a social contract. The social contract. Imagine there was a time before societies, before governments, before laws, just individuals living in what philosophers call a state of nature. In this state, everyone is free, but everyone is also vulnerable. There's no protection, no security, no one to enforce agreements or stop violence. Life, as one philosopher said, is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So people come together. They make an agreement, a contract. They agree to give up some of their freedom in exchange for security, for protection, for the benefits of living together. They create government. They establish laws. They accept limits on their behavior because everyone else accepts those limits too. This is the social contract, an implicit agreement that grounds political authority, that justifies why we have governments, why we follow laws, why we accept restrictions on our freedom. Of course, there never really was such a moment. No one actually signed a contract. But the idea helps us think about legitimacy, about what makes a government justified. A government is legitimate when it serves the interests of those governed, when it protects rights, when it provides what individuals cannot provide for themselves. And if a government violates the contract, if it becomes tyrannical, perhaps the people have the right to dissolve it, to form a new contract. The social contract asks us, what would we agree to? What kind of society would rational people choose if they were starting from scratch? One modern philosopher took this question and gave it a twist, a way to think about justice from behind a veil, the veil of ignorance. Imagine you're going to design a society. You'll choose its rules, its laws, its distribution of resources. But there's a catch. You don't know who you'll be in that society. You don't know if you'll be rich or poor. talented or disabled, male or female, black or white. You don't know your religion, your preferences, your abilities. You're behind a veil of ignorance. You have no information about your particular place in the society you're designing. Now, what kind of society would you choose? The philosopher John Rawls said, "You choose fairly. You choose justly, because you might end up anywhere. You might be the least advantaged person. So you want a society that protects the vulnerable, that provides basic liberties to everyone, that ensures opportunities for all, that distributes resources in a way that benefits the least well-off. You wouldn't create a society with extreme inequality because you might be at the bottom. You wouldn't deny rights to minorities because you might be a minority. The veil of ignorance is a thought experiment, a way to strip away our biases, our self-interest, our tendency to design rules that benefit ourselves. It asks, what would impartial justice look like? What would we choose if we didn't know who we'd be? It's a beautiful idea, isn't it? Justice is fairness. Society designed from a position of equality, where no one can rig the game in their favor. These ideas, the social contract, the veil of ignorance, they rest on something deeper, a set of values about what matters. This is humanism. Humanism is the view that human beings are valuable, that human dignity, human reason, human flourishing, these are central to how we think about the world. It's not necessarily religious. In fact, humanism often emphasizes that we can find meaning, purpose, and ethics without appealing to the divine. Humanism says humans have the capacity for reason, for moral judgment, for creating meaning in their lives. And this capacity is what grounds human rights, human dignity. Every person deserves respect. Every person has inherent worth, not because of what they can do or what they produce, but simply because they're human. Humanism shaped the Enlightenment, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the idea that all people are created equal, that they have inalienable rights. It's a powerful vision, one that has driven moral progress, the end of slavery, the expansion of rights, the recognition that all humans, regardless of race, gender, or class, deserve dignity. But humanism also faces questions. Is it too human-centered? Does it neglect the environment, other species, the broader web of life? And can human values really be universal when different cultures have different beliefs? This question leads us to consider cultural relativism. Cultural relativism. Cultural relativism says different cultures have different practices, different values, different ways of organizing life, and we shouldn't judge other cultures by our own standards. What seems wrong to us might be appropriate in another context. What we value might not be universal. Think of marriage practices, gender roles, concepts of honor and shame. These vary dramatically across cultures. The cultural relativist says there's no objective standpoint from which to judge. Each culture has its own framework, its own coherence, and we should respect that diversity. Not to impose our values on others is a kind of imperialism, cultural arrogance. It assumes our way is the right way, the only way. Cultural relativism asks for humility, for recognition that our perspective is just one among many, that what seems natural to us is actually culturally specific. But cultural relativism creates tension. If all cultural practices are equally valid, can we criticize any practice? Can we condemn oppression if it's culturally accepted? Are there no universal human rights? No practices that are wrong, regardless of culture? This is where cultural relativism becomes difficult. It asks for respect, but perhaps too much respect. It risks making all judgments impossible. Cultural relativism is about practices across societies. But there's a deeper form of relativism, one about morality itself. Moral relativism. Moral relativism says there are no objective moral truths, no facts about right and wrong that exist independently of what we believe. Morality is a human construction, created by cultures, by individuals, different for different people, different for different times. What's right for you might be wrong for me, not because we're in different situations, but because rightness itself is relative, subjective, a matter of perspective. This sounds troubling, doesn't it? Because if there are no objective moral truths, then what grounds our convictions? What allows us to say that slavery is wrong, that compassion is good, that justice matters? The moral relativist might respond, we can still have our values. We can still live by principles. But we should recognize these are our values, not truths written into the fabric of reality. Moral relativism asks, can you be committed to your values while admitting they're not objectively true? Can you live meaningfully without moral certainty? Most philosophers resist moral relativism. They search for some foundation, some objectivity, some way to ground the claim that some things really are wrong, regardless of what anyone believes. But the debate continues, and perhaps the question has no final answer. Let's turn now to something different, to a critique of society that asks, are we truly free? Or are we shaped, constrained by forces we don't even see? This is the concept of alienation. Alienation means separation, estrangement, feeling disconnected from something that should be part of you. The philosopher Karl Marx wrote about alienation in the context of work. He said, in modern capitalist society, workers are alienated from the products they make. You work in a factory, but the thing you create doesn't belong to you. It belongs to someone else. You put your labor into it, but it's sold for someone else's profit. Alienated from the act of working. Work isn't something you do because it's meaningful, because it expresses who you are. It's something you do to survive, to earn money. It's imposed on you by necessity, alienated from your own human nature. Humans are creative beings. We're meant to shape the world, to express ourselves through our activity. But modern work reduces us to cogs in a machine. Repetitive, meaningless, controlled by others, and alienated from other people. Instead of cooperating, we're in competition. Instead of community, we have isolation. Each person pursuing their own interests in a system that sets us against each other. Alienation describes a kind of spiritual poverty. Even in material abundance, something is missing. We're disconnected from our work, our products, ourselves, each other. And Marx believed this wasn't natural. It was a product of how society is organized, of capitalism, of systems that prioritize profit over human flourishing. Alienation invites us to ask, are we living freely, or are we trapped in systems that diminish us? But perhaps the deepest form of unfreedom is when we don't even recognize our chains. This is false consciousness. False consciousness means believing things that go against your own interests, accepting ideologies that justify your oppression, thinking you're free when you're not. Imagine a society with deep inequality, where some have wealth and power and others have very little. But those at the bottom don't rebel, don't resist. Instead, they accept it. They believe it's natural, fair, even necessary. They've internalized the ideology of the powerful. They've come to see the system as legitimate, even though it harms them. This is false consciousness, a kind of self-deception. Not intentional, but shaped by the society around you. By education, by media, by culture. By 1,000 subtle messages about how things are and should be. The concept is troubling because it suggests your beliefs might not be fully your own. You might think you're thinking freely, but you're thinking what the system wants you to think. Who decides what's fair and who benefits? Perhaps those who benefit also shape what seems fair. They control not just resources, but ideas. They make their interests seem like everyone's interests. False consciousness asks, can you trust your own beliefs? How do you know what you think is genuinely yours and what's been planted there by structures of power? It's an unsettling question, one that invites suspicion, that asks us to look beneath the surface, to question not just society, but our own thinking. But perhaps recognizing the possibility of false consciousness is the first step toward freedom, toward thinking critically, toward asking who benefits from this arrangement, who defines what's normal, what am I not seeing? And so we've moved from individuals to systems, from personal choice to social structures. We've considered the social contract, the veil of ignorance, humanism, and its universal aspirations. We've wrestled with cultural and moral relativism, with a question of whether values can transcend perspectives. We've encountered alienation, the sense that something in modern life separates us from what matters, and false consciousness, the disturbing possibility that our beliefs might serve others' interests more than our own. Who decides what's fair and who benefits? These questions don't have easy answers, but asking them, that itself is political. That itself is a form of resistance against complacency, against assuming things must be as they are. Let these questions rest with you now, these challenges to how we organize our life together, not as problems to solve tonight, but as invitations to see differently as you drift into sleep, into dreams, where perhaps we imagine new ways of being together. Here is the script with all bracketed text completely removed and nothing else changed. What if life has no built-in meaning? WEV journeyed through questions of knowledge, of reality, of self and society. We've asked how to live, how to organize our world together. But now, we arrive at something deeper, something more personal. What if there's no grand design, no cosmic purpose, no meaning, except the meaning we create? This question, this confrontation with meaninglessness, is where philosophy becomes most intimate, most urgent, most alive. There's a movement in philosophy that begins with this very question, that starts from the absence of given meaning. Existentialism. Existentialism says existence comes before essence. What does this mean? For most things, essence comes first. A knife is made to cut. That's its essence, its purpose, defined before it exists. The knife doesn't choose what it is. But human beings, we're different. We exist first. We're thrown into the world without a predefined purpose, without an instruction manual, without a nature that tells us what to be. We have to decide. We have to choose. We create our essence through our choices, through how we live. This is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because there's no script, no guarantee, no cosmic authority telling you what your life should be. You're radically free, and that freedom is a burden. But liberating because you're not trapped. You're not determined. You can become who you choose to become. You're the author of your own existence. Existentialism confronts the human condition, our finitude, our mortality, our aloneness, the fact that we must choose without knowing if we're choosing right. It speaks of anxiety, that vertigo we feel when we recognize our freedom, of authenticity, living in accordance with your true self rather than social expectations, of bad faith, the ways we hide from our freedom, pretending we have no choice when we do. Existentialism doesn't offer comfort. It offers clarity. It says, you are free, radically free, and that freedom is what you must face. Life has no built-in meaning, but that doesn't mean life is meaningless. It means the meaning is yours to make. But what if there is no meaning to make? What if the universe is fundamentally empty and any meaning we create is just pretense? This is nihilism. Nihilism comes from the Latin word for nothing, and that's what it sees. Nothing. No objective meaning. No objective values. No purpose. No point. The nihilist says, we live in an indifferent universe. A universe that doesn't care about us. Doesn't care about our projects, our values, our suffering. We're cosmic accidents. Brief flickers of consciousness in an ocean of time. We're born, we live, we die. And the universe continues, unchanged, uncaring. Our values, arbitrary, created by evolution, by culture, by random historical accidents. Nothing is truly important. Nothing truly matters. Success and failure, good and evil, beauty and ugliness. These are just human constructs. Labels we paste onto a world that has no labels of its own. Nihilism is bleak. It strips away all pretense, all comfort. It stares into the void and sees only emptiness. Some people find this liberating. If nothing matters, then you're free. Free from expectations. Free from guilt. Free to do whatever you want. But others find it crushing. If nothing matters, then why do anything? Why get out of bed? Why care about anyone or anything? Nihilism is philosophy at its most ruthless, its most uncompromising. It offers no consolation, only truth, or what it believes is truth. The recognition that we're alone, in a universe without meaning, without purpose, without hope. But not all philosophers accept this stark choice. Between cosmic meaning and cosmic meaninglessness, between certainty and void. Some say, we've been asking the wrong questions, focusing on the wrong things. This is pragmatism. Pragmatism says, stop worrying about ultimate truth, about metaphysical certainty, about what things really are. Instead, ask what works, what's useful, what helps you navigate life. Truth isn't about correspondence with some independent reality. Truth is what's useful to believe, what helps you predict, what guides successful action. The pragmatist doesn't care if the external world really exists in some ultimate sense. They care that believing in it helps you avoid walking into walls. They don't ask if moral values are objectively real. They ask, do these values help us live together? Do they make society function? Do they reduce suffering? Pragmatism is philosophy made practical. It says, let's focus on consequences, on what difference our ideas make in experience. If two theories predict the same observations, lead to the same actions, then what's the point of arguing which is really true? Pragmatism deflates philosophical problems. It says many of them are just word games, debates about nothing real, nothing that makes a difference. It's refreshing in a way, down to earth. It asks philosophy to justify itself, to show how it helps, to be relevant to life. But critics say Isn't truth more than usefulness? Can't something be true, even if believing it doesn't help? And doesn't pragmatism dodge the deep questions rather than answer them? Pragmatism questioned metaphysics. But in the 20th century, other philosophers went further. They questioned meaning itself. One approach was verificationism. Verificationism says a statement is only meaningful if it can be verified, if it can be tested, if there's some way, in principle, to check if it's true or false. The table is brown. That's meaningful. You can look and check. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. That's meaningful. You can measure. But God exists, or the soul is immortal, or beauty is objective. How would you verify these? What observation would prove or disprove them? The verificationist says, if you can't verify a statement, it's not false. It's meaningless. It's not even wrong. It's just noise. Much of philosophy, much of theology, much of metaphysics, the verificationist dismisses, not as incorrect, but as literally meaningless. As pseudo-statements pretending to be statements, verificationism tried to clean up philosophy, to make it rigorous, scientific, to eliminate all the unanswerable questions by showing they weren't real questions at all. But verificationism faced a devastating problem. The principle itself. A statement is meaningful only if verifiable, can't be verified. So by its own standard, it's meaningless. This internal contradiction largely discredited verificationism, but it raised important questions about meaning, about what makes a statement meaningful, about whether philosophy should model itself on science. Another philosopher of science proposed a different principle, one that shaped how we think about scientific theories. Falsificationism. Karl Popper said, we can never verify a scientific theory. We can never prove it's true, because we can't test every case. We can't observe everything, but we can falsify theories. We can prove them wrong. One counterexample is enough. A theory that says all swans are white can't be verified. You'd have to see every swan. But it can be falsified by finding one black swan. So science doesn't proceed by proving theories true. It proceeds by trying to prove them false, by testing them, by searching for counterexamples. Good scientific theories are falsifiable. They make predictions that could be wrong. They stick their neck out. They take risks. Bad theories, pseudoscience, are unfalsifiable. They're compatible with any observation. They can be tested. They explain everything, which means they explain nothing. Falsificationism gave us a way to distinguish science from non-science, a criterion of demarcation. And it changed how we think about scientific knowledge, not as certain truths, but as bold conjectures that have survived our attempts to refute them so far. But let's return to a very old problem, one that touches meaning differently, one that asks, if there's a good God, why is there so much suffering? The problem of evil. If God is all-powerful, God could prevent suffering. If God is all good, God would want to prevent suffering. But suffering exists. Enormous suffering. Innocent suffering. How can all three be true? This isn't just an abstract puzzle. It's personal. It's the question people ask when tragedy strikes, when a child dies, when disaster comes, when life seems unbearably cruel. Where is God? Why doesn't God intervene? Theologians have offered many responses. Perhaps suffering builds character. Perhaps it's necessary for free will. Perhaps we can't understand God's plan. Perhaps evil is the absence of good rather than a thing itself. But these responses often feel inadequate. They don't explain the scale of suffering, the pointlessness of so much pain, the way evil seems gratuitous, excessive. For many, the problem of evil leads away from belief. If this is the world a good God would create, then perhaps there is no such God. For others, it deepens faith, makes it more honest, less about easy answers, more about trust despite the darkness. The problem of evil confronts us with a gap between the world we'd wish for and the world we have. It asks us to reconcile goodness and power with the brute fact of suffering. And perhaps there is no reconciliation. Perhaps it remains a problem, a wound, a question without answer. We've touched on relativism before. Cultural relativism, moral relativism. But let's return to it now, at the end of our journey. Relativism. Relativism says truth, meaning, value. These aren't absolute. They're relative to perspective, to culture, to framework, to individual. What's true for you may not be true for me. Not because one of us is wrong, but because truth itself is relative, context-dependent, framework-dependent. Relativism emerges from recognizing diversity. Different cultures believe different things. Different frameworks use different concepts. Different individuals have different experiences. Who's to say which is right? From what neutral standpoint could we judge? Relativism seems humble. It refuses to impose one view on everyone. It respects difference. It acknowledges limits to our perspective. But relativism also troubles us. If truth is relative, can we say anything is really true? Can we criticize harmful beliefs? Can we have rational debate? If someone believes the earth is flat and that's true for them, can we say they're wrong? Most philosophers resist full-blown relativism. They search for some objective ground, some shared reality, some basis for saying, no, some things are true, or false regardless of what anyone believes. But relativism won't go away. It keeps returning, reminding us that our perspective is just one perspective. That certainty is elusive, that we see through a glass darkly. And so we've reached the existential heart of philosophy, the confrontation with doubt, with meaninglessness, with the limits of certainty. We've met existentialism, which says meaning is ours to create, nihilism, which sees only emptiness, pragmatism, which focuses on what works rather than what's ultimately true. We've encountered verificationism and falsificationism, attempts to clarify what meaningful statements are. The problem of evil, which questions divine goodness in a suffering world. And relativism, which challenges the very idea of absolute truth. What if life has no built-in meaning? Perhaps that's not the end of the story. Perhaps it's the beginning. The place where we start, not with answers handed down, but with freedom to create, to choose, to become. Perhaps philosophy doesn't give us certainty. Perhaps it gives us something else. The courage to question, the honesty to doubt, the freedom to think for ourselves. And perhaps that's enough. Let these questions rest with you now. Let doubt not be something to fear, but something to live with. Something that keeps you honest, keeps you searching, keeps you awake to mystery. Until now, as you drift into sleep, where meaning dissolves, and yet somehow, in dreams, everything seems meaningful again. Here's your 12 to 15-minute script. How do philosophers actually think? What are the tools they use when they wrestle with these great questions? We've traveled through knowledge and reality, through mind and society, through meaning and doubt. But we haven't yet looked at the method itself, the way philosophers work, the techniques they use to think clearly, to argue carefully, to discover truth. Tonight, let's turn our attention to the practice of philosophy, to the tools that make philosophical thinking possible. Philosophy isn't just about having opinions. It's about thinking rigorously, about following arguments where they lead, about using specific tools that have been refined over thousands of years. And the most fundamental tool of all is logic. Logic is the study of valid reasoning, of what follows from what, of how to move from premises to conclusions without error. Logic asks, if these statements are true, what else must be true? If I accept this, what am I committed to accepting? It's the skeleton beneath philosophical argument, the structure that holds everything together. Think of logic as a kind of map of valid inference. It shows you which paths lead reliably from one idea to another, which connections are solid and which are illusions. When you say all humans are mortal, Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal, you're using logic. You're following a pattern of reasoning that guarantees the conclusion if the premises are true. Logic isn't about discovering new truths about the world. It's about understanding what's already implied in what we know, about unpacking the consequences of our beliefs. It's formal, abstract. Sometimes it uses symbols like mathematics. But at its heart, logic is about clarity, about seeing clearly how ideas connect. Without logic, philosophy would be chaos, just assertions and opinions colliding. With logic, philosophy becomes something more. Discipline, a method, a way of thinking that can actually make progress. And logic reveals something beautiful, that some truths are necessary, that they couldn't be otherwise, that once you accept certain premises, certain conclusions follow inevitably, like water flowing downhill. Logic is philosophy's foundation, the bedrock on which everything else is built. But philosophy isn't just logical deduction. It's not just following rules mechanically. There's another method, equally ancient, equally important, a method of thinking through conversation, through back and forth, through the clash and synthesis of ideas. This is the dialectic. Dialectic comes from the Greek word for conversation, and that's what it is, a structured dialogue, a process of thinking together. The dialectic begins with a thesis, an idea, a position. Someone proposes it, states it clearly, defends it. But then comes the antithesis, an opposing view, a challenge, a different perspective that reveals problems with the thesis, that shows what it overlooks or gets wrong. And from the tension between thesis and antithesis, something new emerges, synthesis, a higher understanding that incorporates insights from both sides while transcending their limitations. But the synthesis becomes a new thesis, and the process begins again. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, each cycle moving toward greater understanding. The dialectic recognizes something profound. That truth often emerges from conflict, from disagreement, from the friction between different perspectives. One person alone, thinking in isolation, can only go so far. But two people, challenging each other, questioning each other, can discover things neither would have found alone. Socrates practiced dialectic in the streets of Athens. He'd question people about their beliefs, push them, show them contradictions they hadn't noticed, not to humiliate them, but to help them think more clearly. Philosophy for Socrates was fundamentally social. It happened in conversation, through questioning and answering, through the living exchange of ideas. The dialectic is still alive in philosophy today, in seminars and conferences, in the back and forth of published arguments, in the way philosophers respond to each other, refine their views, move toward truth together. It's a reminder that philosophy isn't a solitary activity. It's collaborative, communal, built through dialogue across time and space. But philosophers have another powerful tool, one that's become iconic, one that you've already encountered in this journey: the thought experiment. A thought experiment is a scenario, usually imaginary, sometimes impossible, designed to isolate a specific question and make it vivid. We've already met some of these: the trolley problem, the veil of ignorance, Descartes' evil demon, Plato's cave. These aren't real situations. You'll never actually face a runaway trolley. There's no actual veil of ignorance you can go behind, but that's the point. Thought experiments strip away the complexity of real life. They create simplified scenarios where we can focus on what really matters philosophically. They make abstract questions concrete. They turn philosophical problems into stories, into situations we can imagine ourselves in. Would you push the person off the bridge to save 5 others? The thought experiment forces you to confront your intuitions, to see what you really believe about the ethics of action and inaction. If you didn't know your place in society, what rules would you choose? The thought experiment reveals what fairness really requires when self-interest is removed. Thought experiments are powerful because they engage our imagination, our emotions, our intuitions. Philosophy becomes less abstract, more personal, more alive, and they reveal inconsistencies in our thinking. You might believe 2 principles that seem compatible until a thought experiment shows they lead to contradictory judgments. Some philosophers criticize thought experiments. They say our intuitions about imaginary scenarios aren't reliable, that we're bad at imagining truly different worlds. But thought experiments persist because they work. They illuminate. They help us think through difficult questions by making them vivid and specific. They're like philosophical microscopes, tools for magnifying small distinctions, for seeing clearly what's usually blurred. And they remind us that philosophy isn't just about logic and argument. It's also about imagination, about envisioning possibilities, about exploring the space of what could be. But there's one more tool we should consider, one that's particularly clever, particularly devastating when deployed well: the performative contradiction. A performative contradiction happens when the act of saying something contradicts the content of what you're saying. Imagine someone says, "I cannot speak English," but they just said it in English. The act of making the claim contradicts the claim itself. Or imagine someone argues, "There is no truth," but if that statement is true, then there is at least one truth which contradicts the statement. Or consider someone who says, "You should never tell anyone what to do," but in saying that, they're telling you what to do. These are performative contradictions. The performance, the act of asserting, undermines the assertion itself. Philosophers use this to devastating effect. If someone claims reason is useless, you can ask, "Are you giving me a reason to believe that?" If they say yes, they're using reason to deny reason. If they say no, why should you believe them? If someone claims all beliefs are equally valid, you can ask if that belief is equally valid to its opposite. If it is, then we can dismiss it. If it isn't, then not all beliefs are equally valid. Performative contradictions reveal deep incoherence. They show that some positions can't even be coherently stated, that in the very act of defending them, you undermine them. This technique goes back to ancient philosophy. to the recognition that some truths are presupposed by the very act of thinking or arguing. You can't coherently deny them, because denying them requires assuming them. You can't coherently argue that argumentation is impossible. You can't coherently think that thought is impossible. You can't coherently claim that there's no such thing as claiming. Performative contradictions mark the boundaries of coherent thought. They show us what we can't deny without undermining ourselves, what we're committed to simply by engaging in philosophical discourse. They're powerful because they're self-refuting. You don't need to argue against them. They collapse under their own weight. And they remind us that philosophy isn't just about words. It's about the activity of philosophizing, about what we presuppose when we think, when we speak, when we engage with each other. So these are the tools. Logic, which maps valid inference. The dialectic, which generates understanding through dialogue. Thought experiments, which make abstract questions concrete. And performative contradictions, which expose self-defeating positions. These aren't just techniques. They're ways of being, ways of engaging with ideas, ways of pursuing truth with honesty and rigor. Philosophy isn't just a collection of theories. It's a practice, discipline, a craft that requires skill and patience and care. And these tools, refined over millennia, are what make that practice possible. What allow philosophers to think clearly about the deepest questions. What allow progress even in the most difficult domains. When you use these tools yourself, when you think logically, when you engage in genuine dialogue, when you imagine scenarios carefully, when you notice contradictions, you're not just thinking about philosophy. You're doing philosophy. You're participating in one of humanity's oldest and most important activities. The activity of thinking carefully about what matters most. And perhaps that's what philosophy ultimately is. Not a body of doctrine, not a set of answers, but a way of thinking, a method, practice, a commitment to clarity, to honesty, to following arguments where they lead, even when they lead somewhere uncomfortable, a willingness to question, to doubt, to revise, to think again. These tools, these methods, they're gifts from centuries of thinkers who came before, who struggled with the same questions, who developed these techniques through trial and error, who passed them down so that we could think more clearly. And now, as we near the end of this journey, you have them too. Not just the questions of philosophy, but the tools for thinking about those questions, for wrestling with them yourself, for continuing the conversation that began in ancient Greece and continues still, wherever people think carefully about what it means to be human, to know, to live well. Let these tools rest in your mind now, not as rigid formulas, but as flexible instruments, ways of thinking that you can return to, ways of approaching questions that have no easy answers, ways of being more thoughtful, more rigorous, more honest in your thinking. And as you drift towards sleep, perhaps you'll dream of arguments, of dialogues, of thought experiments unfolding, of contradictions revealing themselves, of truth emerging slowly, patiently, through the careful work of thought. Here's your 12 to 15-minute script. We've traveled far tonight, through questions of knowledge and reality, through mind and body, freedom and fate, through ethics and society, meaning and doubt, through the very tools philosophers used to think. And now, as we near the end, let's return to where we began, to the place where philosophy starts, with wonder, with doubt, with the courage to question what seems certain. Let's return to skepticism. We met skepticism at the beginning of this journey, the practice of questioning, of not accepting things simply because they're presented to us, of asking, how do we know? And then, how How do we know that? Skepticism might seem negative at first, like it's only about tearing down, about destroying certainty, about leaving us with nothing. But that's not quite right. Skepticism is more like clearing the ground, removing the debris of unexamined assumptions, making space for clearer thinking. The skeptic doesn't reject everything. They suspend judgment. They hold beliefs lightly. They remain open to revision. And there's wisdom in this, because most of what we believe, we've never really examined. We absorbed it from our culture, our upbringing, our surroundings. We assumed it was true because everyone around us assumed it was true. Skepticism asks us to wake up from that sleepwalk, to notice our assumptions, to examine them, to keep only what survives questioning. This doesn't mean doubting everything all the time. That would be exhausting, impossible even. We have to trust our senses, trust memory, trust reason, at least provisionally, or we can't function at all. But it means holding our beliefs with humility, with awareness that we might be wrong, with willingness to change our minds when we encounter better evidence, better arguments. Skepticism is really about intellectual honesty, about admitting the limits of our knowledge, about distinguishing between what we truly know and what we merely assume. And in a world full of dogmatism, full of people utterly certain they're right, skepticism is refreshing, even necessary. It's a kind of intellectual hygiene, a way of keeping the mind clean and flexible. The ancient skeptics had a goal, not knowledge, but tranquility. They believed that suspending judgment, not clinging too tightly to beliefs, leads to a kind of peace, an ease of mind. When you're not constantly defending your beliefs, not anxious about being wrong, not attacking those who disagree, something relaxes. You become more open, more curious, more at peace. And perhaps that's what we need most. Not more certainty, but more comfort with uncertainty. Not final answers, but better questions. Not closed minds, but open ones. Skepticism, practiced wisely, doesn't leave us paralyzed. It leaves us free. Free to think for ourselves. Free to revise our understanding. Free to grow. But skepticism alone isn't enough. We still have to live. We still have to make decisions. We still have to act in the world. And this brings us back to another idea we encountered. An idea that offers a way forward. A philosophy that doesn't promise ultimate truth but offers something perhaps more valuable. Something more useful. Pragmatism. We met pragmatism before, when it told us to focus on consequences rather than abstract metaphysics, to ask what works rather than what's ultimately true. But pragmatism is more than just a theory. It's an attitude, a way of approaching philosophy in life. The pragmatist says, look, we may never have final answers to the deepest questions. We may never know with certainty what reality is made of, whether we have free will, whether meaning is objective. But we still have to live. We still have to choose. We still have to act. So let's focus on what helps us navigate life well. What helps us solve problems? What helps us live together? What helps us flourish? Truth, for the pragmatist, isn't about correspondence with some hidden reality we can never fully access. Truth is about beliefs that guide us successfully through experience, that help us predict, understand, and engage with the world effectively. This doesn't mean truth is just whatever we want it to be. Our beliefs are constrained by reality. False beliefs lead to failed predictions, to problems, to consequences we didn't intend. But it means we can stop worrying about whether we've grasped ultimate reality with a capital R and capital U. We can focus instead on whether our beliefs are serving us well. Are they helping us understand the world? Are they making us more compassionate, more effective, more alive? Are they solving problems or creating new ones? Pragmatism is optimistic. It believes we can make progress, not by finding final answers, but by improving our questions, by developing better tools, by learning from experience. It sees philosophy not as a quest for certainty, but as an ongoing process of inquiry, a conversation that continues, practice that evolves. And this is liberating, because if philosophy isn't about finding final answers, then we don't have to wait for certainty before we act. We don't have to solve every philosophical problem before we can live meaningful lives. We can live with uncertainty. We can act on the best understanding we have now, while remaining open to revising that understanding later. We can be humble about what we know, while still being committed to living well with what we believe. Pragmatism says philosophy matters because of what it does, because of how it changes us, because of the difference it makes in how we live. And maybe that's the right way to think about this journey we've taken tonight. Not as a series of final answers deposited in your mind, but as a practice, as a beginning. Philosophy isn't something you finish. It's something you do, something you return to, something that deepens over time. The questions we've explored tonight, they're not questions you solve once and move on. They're questions you live with, questions that evolve as you evolve, questions that matter differently at different stages of life. When you're young, questions of meaning and purpose might burn urgently. When you're facing loss, questions of mortality and value become visceral. When you're building a life with others, questions of ethics and society become immediate. Philosophy isn't separate from life. It's woven into life. It's the practice of thinking carefully about what you're already living through. And the great thing about philosophy is that you don't need credentials to do it. You don't need a degree or permission. You just need curiosity, honesty, willingness to think. Every time you question an assumption, you're doing philosophy. Every time you try to think clearly about a difficult choice, you're doing philosophy. Every time you ask what makes something valuable, or what would count as evidence, or whether you're being consistent, you're doing philosophy. Philosophy is available to everyone. It's a birthright, a human capacity, the ability to reflect on your own thinking, to step back and examine your beliefs, to wonder about the nature of things. And this practice, this ongoing engagement with fundamental questions, it changes you. Not all at once, gradually, subtly. It makes you more aware, more thoughtful, more humble, more compassionate, because you realize how little anyone really knows for certain. It makes you more resistant to manipulation, to dogma, to easy answers, because you've learned to think for yourself, to question authority, to demand reasons. It makes you more comfortable with complexity, with ambiguity, with living in the questions rather than rushing to answers. And perhaps most importantly, it makes you more fully human. Because philosophy is what humans do. We're the creatures who wonder, who question, who search for meaning and understanding. We can't help it. It's built into us. Even when we try to suppress it, philosophical questions emerge in quiet moments, in times of crisis, in encounters with beauty or suffering or mystery. Philosophy is our nature, and practicing it deliberately, carefully, thoughtfully is a way of honoring that nature, of becoming more fully what we are. The questions we've explored tonight, they're ancient, thousands of years old, asked by countless people across cultures and centuries, and they're still being asked, still alive, still urgent. because they're not historical curiosities. They are human questions. Questions that arise from the basic structure of human existence. As long as there are people, there will be philosophy. Because as long as there are people, there will be wonder. There will be doubt. There will be the need to make sense of things. And the conversation continues. Each generation adds its voice, brings new perspectives, asks the old questions in new ways, discovers new dimensions to ancient problems. You're part of that conversation now. Not just a passive receiver of philosophical ideas, but a participant. Someone who can think these thoughts, ask these questions, contribute your perspective. Philosophy doesn't belong to philosophers. It belongs to anyone who thinks, anyone who wonders, anyone who cares about truth and meaning and understanding. And the beautiful thing is that the practice itself matters. Even if you never arrive at final answers, even if the questions remain questions, the thinking itself has value. It deepens you. It opens you. It makes you more than you were. When you wrestle with whether you have free will, you're not just solving an abstract puzzle. You're examining your own agency, your responsibility, your relationship to your choices. When you question what makes actions right or wrong, you're not just doing ethics. You're clarifying your values, becoming more deliberate about how you live. When you wonder about the nature of reality or consciousness or meaning, you're not just speculating. You're cultivating a sense of wonder, a recognition of mystery, an appreciation for the strangeness and beauty of existence. Philosophy as practice means you carry these questions with you. They become lenses through which you see the world. They inform your choices. They shape who you become. And this practice doesn't require solitude. Remember the dialectic. Philosophy happens in conversation, with friends, with thinkers across time, with yourself. You can keep reading, keep questioning, keep engaging with ideas. The conversation is always there, waiting for you to join. Or you can simply practice philosophical thinking in daily life, noticing assumptions, examining beliefs, asking why, thinking through implications. Either way, philosophy becomes a companion, a resource, a practice that enriches life rather than escaping from it. And perhaps that's the real gift of philosophy. Not final answers, but a way of being with questions. Not certainty, but clarity. Not dogma, but an open, curious, thoughtful engagement with what matters most. So as we close this journey, remember this. Philosophy doesn't give final answers. It teaches us how to live with better questions. Better questions lead to better thinking. Better thinking leads to better living. And better living is what we're all searching for in the end. You don't need to have solved the mind-body problem to live well. You don't need to have settled the question of free will to make meaningful choices. You don't need to have discovered ultimate meaning to live a meaningful life. You just need to keep thinking, keep questioning, keep wondering, keep growing. And that practice, that ongoing engagement with the deepest question, that's philosophy. That's what we've been doing tonight. That's what you can continue doing tomorrow and every day after. The questions remain. They always will. But you're different now. More aware of them. More equipped to think about them. More comfortable with their difficulty. And that's enough. That's everything. Philosophy doesn't end. It continues. In you. Through you. As long as you keep asking. Keep thinking. Keep wondering. As long as you remain curious about what it means to know, to be, to live well. As long as you refuse to accept easy answers to hard questions, and as long as you honor the mystery while still seeking understanding. That's philosophy. That's the practice. That's the gift. And now, as these words fade into silence, as you drift towards sleep, carry these questions lightly. Let them rest in you, not as burdens, but as seeds. Seeds that might grow in unexpected ways, that might bloom into insights you can't yet imagine. Sleep now with philosophy. Dream with it, and wake tomorrow still wondering, still questioning, still alive to the great mystery of being here at all. Philosophy doesn't give final answers. It teaches us how to live with better questions. And better questions, it turns out, are enough.